We know that the American government is corrupt and the systems are bad. But do you really know how bad it is? Most Americans don't know what the Electoral College actually is, and that's worrisome. So let's talk about how the Electoral College is a scam. Throughout this video, I'll be looking at two different sources, the National Archives, and I will be looking at a History Channel article by Dave Ruse. I looked through his sources, they seem pretty legit. The Electoral College is a system that calls for the creation every 4 years of a temporary group of electors equal to the total number of representatives in Congress. Technically, it is these electors and not the American people who vote for the president. In modern elections, the first candidate to get to 270 of the 538 total electoral votes wins the White House. Right off the bat, guys, some of you guys seem to think that the Electoral College is a number assigned to the state, and when the majority vote swings towards one party, all of those numbers get put to the presidential candidate that is in that party. No, they are not some arbitrary number. Each number represents a real person. The Electoral College is a group of real people that are voting for you. Your majority vote doesn't really do much. It doesn't actually vote for the president. It does something else, and we'll get into that later, but the Electoral College is a group of people that vote for you. Now you're thinking, well, Nick, how are these people chosen? That's a very good question. And you're not going to like the answer. Choosing each state's electors is a two-part process. First, the political parties in each state choose slates of potential electors sometime before the general election. Second, during the general election, the voters in each state select their state's electors by casting their ballots. That was the general overview of it, but there's already so many issues in that. Let's get into the more in-depths about the first part of the process. The first part of the process is controlled by the political parties in each state and varies from state to state. Generally, the parties either nominate slates of potential electors at their state party conventions, or they choose them by a vote of the party's central committee. This happens in each state for each party by whatever rules the state party and sometimes the national party have for the process. This first part of the process results in each presidential candidate having something of their own unique slate of potential electors. Political parties often choose individuals for the state to recognize their service and dedication to that political party. They may be state elected officials, state party leaders, or other people in the state who have personal or political affiliation with the party's presidential candidate. That should not be comforting. That's not good. Political parties, which are not in our Constitution, mind you, they are literally a made-up process. I mean, all processes are made up, but this one is literally not a written down part of the US government. Control who elects your president for you. Hi, that's not good. The people that vote for our president, who are not voted on by the general populace of the United States, are nominated to vote for our president by more people that are not voted on by the general populace of the United States. That's not good. The second part of the process happens during the general election. When the voters in each state cast votes for the presidential candidate of their choice, they are voting to select their state's electors. The potential electors' names may or may not appear on the ballot below the name of the presidential candidates, depending upon the election procedures and the ballot formats in each state. The winning presidential candidate's slate of potential electors are appointed as state's electors, except Nebraska and Maine, which have proportional distribution of electors. In Nebraska and Maine, the state's winners receive 2 electors, and the winner of each congressional district, who may be the same as the overall winner or a different candidate, receives 1 elector. This system permits Nebraska and Maine to award electors to more than one candidate. The way that was phrased was absolute bullshit. They made it seem like you do have a say in the president, and maybe a very, very small say in the president. They make it seem like you are voting for your electors. No, you're not. These electors do not run to to be electors. We don't know who they are. I don't know who these people are. I've never seen them run a campaign. I don't know what their views are. I don't know who they are. And yet, this government website trying to explain the Electoral College is making it seem like I am, in fact, voting for them. No, I'm voting for a party, obviously. So essentially, you vote for the party to choose who is going to elect your president for you. You know, the same parties that aren't in our Constitution. We aren't voting for these Electoral College people. We're voting for a party, and then the party chooses for us, and then the Electoral College chooses for us. That's such a roundabout way of giving people the right to vote. And you're probably wondering, do these electors have to vote one way or the other? There is no constitutional provision or federal law that requires electors to vote according to the results of the popular vote in their states. Some states, however, require electors to cast their votes according to the popular vote. These pledges fall into two categories: the electors bound by state law and those bound by pledges to political parties. The U.S. Supreme Court has held that the Constitution does not require that electors be completely free to act as they choose, and therefore political parties may extract pledges from electors to vote for the party's nominees. Some state laws provide that so-called faithless electors may be subject to fines or may be disqualified for casting an invalid vote and may be replaced by a substitute elector. The Supreme Court has not specifically ruled on the question of whether pledges and penalties for failure to vote as pledged may be enforced under the Constitution. No elector has ever been prosecuted for failing to vote as pledged. However, several electors were disqualified and replaced in 2016 for failing to vote as pledged. It is rare for electors to disregard the popular vote by casting their electoral vote for someone other than the party's candidate. Electors generally hold a leadership position in their party or were chosen to recognize years of loyal service to the party. Throughout our history as a nation, more than 99% of the electors vote as pledged. Hi, that doesn't change anything. This is still fucked up. This entire process varies state by state. There are barely any regulations for this process. So for a federal election, we're going to rely on a barely regulated process that varies state by state. The two federal regulations for electors is literally just don't commit treason and don't be an elected official that is sitting in office right now. Those are the only two federal regulations. The states can do whatever the fuck they want. Some states do it in a quite fair way, and other states don't. Other states don't regulate it. For a federal election of the executive chief, mayhaps we should have more strict regulations on this system if we don't just abolish it because it's kind of pointless. There's legitimately no reason in 2020 to have this system. B, I don't care if 99% of these electors vote as pledged. I do not give a shit. The concept that you are taking my vote, my right to choose, and giving it to someone else is already violating my rights. You are giving my vote away to an oligarchy. And what about those 152 electors that did not vote on partisan lines? What about them? They didn't vote how the person that voted wanted them to vote. Because they don't have to. At random times, depending upon the state, there might be consequences, but it's not for certain. You might get switched out with a different elector, you might get fined, but it's not for certain. None of them have been prosecuted, it's not illegal. They can vote however they want, and there may or may not be consequences. It is not certain. Do you see how chaotic that is for all 50 states to have a different process of nominating these people that elect our fucking president? That's fucking chaotic and should not be a thing. If you're going to have a system like this, there needs to be way more regulation on it. You can't just let the states have a fucking free-for-all. But yeah, no, the mere idea that you are taking away my vote and giving it to an elector that I did not vote on, nominated by more people that I did not vote on, is literally infringing upon our rights. Why is that okay? Why is that not infringing upon my rights? Why did this suddenly become, you have a right to vote for the party that decides the elector? I mean, it is the right to vote, kinda, but in a roundabout, corrupt way. See, this entire system, the people that decide who our president is going to be, is based upon the party system, which is not even in our Constitution. A party is just an organized group of people who have the same ideology or who otherwise have the same political positions and who field candidates for elections in an attempt to get them elected and thereby implement the party's agenda. Party committees, which the United States citizens do not vote on publicly, are running our entire elections. They are not in our Constitution. They are not a part of our government. Why are they deciding who gets to vote for our president and who our presidential nominees are? This is so fucked up. Parties are probably one of the most corrupt things about the United States government because they somehow gave themselves a place in the government without actually putting it in the documents. And now it's just accepted that they are a political power in our system. And they just choose everything for us. It's absolutely fucking bonkers. Representative democracy is a shit show, but this proves it. Some of you are thinking, hey, why do we have this dumpster fire of a fuck system in the first place? You know those bastards from the 1700s? It was them. One group of delegates felt strongly that Congress shouldn't have anything to do with picking the president. Too much opportunity for chummy corruption between the executive and legislative branches. They were right. Another camp was dead set against letting the people elect the president by straight popular vote. First, they thought the 18th century voters lacked the resources to be fully informed about the candidates, especially in rural outposts. Second, they feared the headstrong Democratic mob steering the country astray. And third, a populist president appealing directly to the people could command a dangerous amount of power. The Electoral College was never intended to be the perfect system for picking the president, says George Edwards III, emeritus political science professor at Texas A&M University. It wasn't like the founders said, hey, what a great idea. This is the preferred way to select the chief executive, period, says Edwards. They were tired, impatient, frustrated. They cobbled together this plan because they couldn't agree on anything else. Hi, that's terrifying. We are relying on a cobbled together compromise from the 1700s to decide who is our chief executive. That's not good. And it's also important to note that the Electoral College was also created to work around slavery. Yay, more American systems that are connected to slavery. Yeah, the Electoral College is connected to the 3/5 compromise, which if you're non-American or, the American school system failed you, the 3/5 compromise was basically a bunch of white slave owners throwing a hissy fit, pee-pee poo-poo. 60% of our southern population is black slaves that I own because I'm a dickbag. But we want to still include them in our population so we have more electoral votes and more power against states with higher populations. Even though the slaves do not have rights and aren't seen as human beings, we still want to include them to get more power. So the American government was like, fuck it, I guess slaves are 3/5 of a person. Because apparently, black people are only 3/5 of a person. And this is connected to the Electoral College because then 3/5 of black people were considered for counting up how many electoral votes each state got. Don't you love another slavery system we got going on in the United States? First our prisons, and now this? And I know you're thinking, well, Nick, why the fuck does this still exist? Good fucking question. I want to know as well. And I'm sure we can figure it out quite easily, but let's read this excerpt. The party in power typically benefits from the existence of the Electoral College, says Edwards, and the minority party has little chance of changing the system because a constitutional amendment requires a 2/3 supermajority in Congress plus ratification by 3/4 of the states. So corruption. We still have the Electoral College because of power-hungry white men bastards that run our country. I hate it here. One bullshit counterpoint I see that argues for the Electoral College is basically the Electoral College protects the rural vote against high population states. You do realize that high population states still have more power than you under the Electoral College, right? I don't think the Electoral College changes the power dynamic much there, buddy. I'm going to be honest with you. And it's also important to note that if we went by the majority vote, if we put all of rural United States together and put all the high population states together, it's mostly equal anyways in population. So you are pretty equally represented. In fact, you're more equally represented because places like Illinois, for instance, you have Chicago and its suburbs, which are pretty more on the Democrat side, but then you have Southern Illinois and pretty much everywhere else that's pretty Republican. So you would have parts of these liberal states voting the same way you do as well, because they're also partially rural. So you'd literally have more power as a rural folk if we voted by majority vote. So I literally do not understand where this is coming from. Also, your rural vote doesn't matter if you don't actually have the right to vote. Like, these motherfuckers went pee-pee poo-poo, California has more power than me, so nobody gets to vote now. Johnny has more cookies than me, nobody gets a cookie now. Shut the fuck up. Your rural vote doesn't matter more under the Electoral College system because you aren't actually voting for your president under this system. You literally got your own right to vote taken away because you were being a piss baby. So the Electoral College is literally a prime example of how representative democracy is a shit show and an oligarchy, essentially. These fuckers have found a way to make an oligarchy, but pretend like it's democracy. And I just find it quite interesting that they don't teach you this in American government class unless the teacher offhandedly says it. It's not a part of the curriculum. I wonder why. Yeah, America, that's really shady. Why don't you teach your citizens this? It's almost as if you're trying to keep us stupid. Just wanted to disclaim, this does not mean don't vote, because you still have power over your senators, your mayors, your judges, your house reps. Please still vote. Don't take this as a don't vote. Take this as a holy shit, we need to start gearing up for the revolution because this is not good. And even in the case of voting for the president, even though it is infringing upon your rights, at least you get to choose which party, right? Still vote for your president, even though it doesn't matter that much, but still do it. If you're not voting, I expect you to be ready to burn down the Capitol. You have two choices, vote or help me burn down the Capitol. Please still vote, but understand that your rights are being infringed upon.